What's up, and welcome back to Talking Nutrition, episode 32 today. We're going to talk about nutritional labels, serving sizes, and basically foods that you want to rely on for the most part, right? And kind of like things you want to keep in mind. Like when you look at a label, just so you understand it, right? And I think Kristine and I are both working on more like educational resources for our clients. And you said you kind of took this from what you're building out, right, Kristine?
Yes.
Awesome. So let's kind of walk through it like step by step. So we'll start with serving sizes, then we'll look into protein, carb, fat, and fiber sources, etc. And then basically, which I think is quite misleading sometimes, like serving sizes. You know,
Yeah.
it's they can be very tricky to understand and a little eye opening too once you actually start weighing your stuff.
Yeah.
Usually it's a massive bummer.
Yes.
But real quick before we get into the episode, anything new, Kristine?
No. Just
Not really?
chugging along, working. Look at Rose.
She
Can you
behind
see
you?
her?
Yeah.
For those of you watching, Rose is in the video currently.
And by the way, if you're not watching, go ahead and follow us on YouTube so you can actually see Rose today.
She'll sit here and just wait till I hold her hand. See, and then I just hold her hand and she's fine.
Pets are the best.
Yeah.
Oh, this is great. Where were we? I'm already distracted.
Yeah.
Nothing new. Yeah, I mean, I'm also just working, like same shit, you know. It's long days, but it's rewarding. It's exciting, and I just like creating shit, you know. So I've been working on guides and trainings, and like basically I'm working on resources to cover like every single problem and question that will ever come up, so that it's already there, you know.
Yeah.
Which for our fellow coaches, this might actually, like, this is unrelated to the episode, but I think it could be cool to talk about. In the very beginning, or at least I felt like this, we probably did as well. You tend to think like, fuck, I need all this stuff right away. You know, I need to have the trainings and the ebooks and all, like the resources or whatever. We actually don't.
Mm-hmm.
The cool thing is, just how with fitness and nutrition and training, you just take it step by step. You work on your hydration and then you get your protein intake in check, whatever. Same shit for us coaches, right? Like you create a resource and then maybe the next one, and then maybe the next one. You don't have to do everything all at once. And I know at times, because we've been talking for a long time, and I know we both felt very overwhelmed at times where it was like, fuck, you know, we have to like create this stuff, and like you always overthink it as a coach. Just take it step by step. So that's even still now stuff that we're working on. We're always building, always improving, redoing stuff, updating stuff, you know.
Constantly,
so it's fun.
Yeah.
Keeps it exciting, you know?
Yeah.
I really like this.
I love bringing more value to the clients.
100%.
It's a good feeling.
Yeah. Which is kind of cool because the longer you stay on, the more stuff you get, basically, you know?
Seriously. I've had clients with me for years, and they've seen the updates like as like they've started at frick. I don't know, like some of my stuff years back, just in terms of like resources and check-ins, and it's just like night and day difference. And they have been through that whole transition, and they're like, it's so awesome that you do this. I'm like, well, yeah, I care, right? I want you guys to have a really good experience.
That's the best.
So, yeah. Anywho,
we'll get into the episode. Anywho.
Okay. So I thought it would be a good topic to touch on is understanding food labels. I pulled this out of the course that I'm building for my clients. And I just think it's good to bring attention to, because there's some stuff I feel like we don't pay attention to that we should, or we get tricked by like marketing, right? Because like, for example, we could see a food and it says 70 calories per serving. And then you look on the back of that label and there's like 10 servings, right? And the serving size is, I don't know, like half a cup, quarter of a cup, right? That's nothing, Or so they're like tricking you that way. That's marketing. So the first step, I mean, I have steps in this, but I mean, you can really put them in any order, right? But I do think a good first step is looking at the serving size, okay, per one serving size, and then how many serving sizes are in the whole product. So in the US, you'll see serving size. They actually just changed the look of the label. The serving size is larger and bolder, and the serving sizes are updated. So they'll do like a cup and then they'll put it in grams, which is typical. So that's going to be in bold. And then on the top of that, you're going to see serving size per container or per bag or whatever it is. So looking at that, okay, serving size is say 2/3 of a cup, but there's 8 serving sizes in that container, right? So now you have to compare, like, for example, compare your portion to the serving size listed. So if the serving size is 1 cup and you're eating 2 cups, you're getting twice the calories, the fat, the other nutrients that are labeled, right? So I think this is where a lot of people do end up making mistakes. I guess you could call it a mistake, maybe. I don't know. They just don't realize, right, what the actual serving size is. And that's why weighing and measuring your food for a period of time can be super, super helpful in understanding portion sizes. So I like to start with that.
Yeah, for sure. I saw a video, and I don't know the dude's name. He's Aaron's friend. So Aaron and him are doing like an educational course for coaches. Mm-hmm. I saw his page, and they had a video where he basically asked a girl, like, here's a bowl, here's your granola, like put in like a serving, like what you think is like a normal serving. And it ended up being like 750 calories or something, and it didn't even look that much. Like it wasn't even too crazy, you know? Yeah. So just learning from those things, like being aware of like, hey, okay, cool, 1 serving. Like I've been saying this to clients like a lot recently, but like be proactive in this situation, right? Like don't just track, don't just kind of pay attention. Like, no, like be present. Like when you do this stuff, look at the label, try to learn. Yeah. Because the more you do, the sooner you're going to understand, the easier it gets, the less stressful, the less time it's going to be. And the sooner you can move away from it eventually, you know?
Right. It's kind of what like Casey posted on this. And it's something I talk about with my clients all the time is like active versus passive tracking, right? Being active, 100%. Looking at the nutritional label, seeing what's in the food, looking at the portion size, say, okay, this is 4 ounces, this is 3 ounces. That's actively tracking. Passively tracking would just be like, you know, grabbing a portion size, estimating, putting it into your tracker, not looking at any of the nutritional facts and not learning.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, so that's step 1. I actually had an experience with this too, even years after doing this. Like I'm still blown away with some of the stuff. So I had cereal the other day, and like a serving size of the serving size of cereal versus what I would actually put in my bowl was very different, right? Like cereal is another one where like it can get away from you very quickly if you're not paying attention to the actual serving size on the back, right? And what it actually is. Okay, now step 2 is looking at how much protein, carbs, fat, fiber, and sugar are in that specific food. So these numbers will represent how much is in the serving size listed. Okay, so again, if you're having twice as much as a serving size, you're going to have twice as much of these. Seems obvious, but still something that a lot of people sometimes don't realize. Actively checking these values is going to start to teach you what exactly is in the food you're eating. Now, I personally, as a coach, I want to talk about this because sugar, it's something that like I actually get asked about a lot when a client comes on and they're like, well, how much sugar should I be intaking? And I'm like, well, to be honest with you, I don't actually focus on that number. What I'm focusing on is the food you're eating and just starting to incorporate more whole sources of food. And that's naturally going to control that sugar intake, right? So instead of focusing on sugar, we're just focusing on improving food quality, which is going to take care of the, excessive sugar potentially. But there's a difference between, like on our labels, if we go to it, there's total sugars. Okay. So that's including like natural and added. And then added sugars here will be under that. And that is more of like your refined processed sugars, right? So there's a difference in, say, fruit, which is like a natural sugar, right? Versus candy, which is like added sugar, refined sugar, right? So again, by focusing on whole sources of food most of the time, we are going to control that added sugar amount.
I hear that one a lot still. Because there's sugars of fruit. Like, should I watch out for that? Or, is it bad if I get sugars from apples and berries? I'm like, never, ever, ever was fruit the issue,
No.
Like if we need to worry about like how much sugar is in fruit, like then we're just completely just missing the point here.
Yeah.
Sugar isn't bad per se, and it's still being demonized. And sure, like you don't want to have a whole bunch of added sugar.
Yeah.
Usually not a great idea. But that says something about the food quality, which we'll get into today as well, about like what foods we want to choose. But sure, like look at that. But just like overall, just try to control your carbs, and also get your proteins, your fiber, your fats, etc. And just focus on like the foods that you're getting, right? Sure, there's some sugar in it, but it's not going to do anything negative.
Right.
Depending on the context, of course, but again, it's never the apple.
Yeah. Very true. Very true. So an example of this would be plain dairy milk will show 12 grams of total sugars, which are naturally occurring from lactose per cup, but 0 added sugars. And then on the flip side of that, there'll be, say, a cup of strawberry yogurt might show 20 grams of total sugars, 10 which are added, and 10 which are naturally occurring from the lactose. So you're going to see total, and then you're going to see added. So yeah, another thing to just, it's something to be aware of, but still at the end of the day, I just like to just focus on adding more whole sources of food in and not necessarily hyper focusing on this.
Yeah. I want to add a little side note as well, because there is a difference in terms of the carbohydrate on European versus American labels. And we both work with people from both over here as well as the US. So I think it's good to mention, just so we have a good understanding of this stuff, right? So there's carbohydrate, your total carbohydrate for the day, basically, which would be your target. If we then look at fiber, which is really a type of carbohydrate as well, it's not really broken down, used for fuel. We can subtract that, and then what's left is net carbs. So net carbs is basically the stuff that you actually use for fuel, right? Now, also, if you look on a label, so for you guys, you have your total carbohydrate, and then below that, you'll see like dietary fiber and sugars, right? And added sugar. In Europe, it has carbohydrate, but it's actually net carbs. So it has carbohydrate, and then sugars below that, and then typically fiber is separate. So if we want to look at the label and understand in Europe, we actually have to add fiber to that carbohydrate number to get to our total carb.
Yeah, because a lot of people think that fiber doesn't have any calories, right?
Also, yeah.
But it does. It actually has 2 calories per gram. So it's just best to track total. It's just easier.
Yeah, that's the thing. And there's already going to be a difference in terms of like maybe in your tracking sheet versus like Chronometer or like
Yeah.
whatever app.
Mm-hmm.
But it's all just about like understanding it, right?
Yeah.
Cool. Now, in terms of kind of the foods that we want to aim for, we're going to benefit from kind of like going in with a plan, right? So even before we look for those kind of foods, I want you to kind of think, okay, how am I going to put together my meal, right? Even before getting to the store. I think that's a big one because,
Yes.
and I know we do this the same way, like when you look at a meal, healthy meal is going to keep you full, will give you the micronutrients you need, the macronutrients, and that's going to help you build muscle, lose fat, etc., improve your health. We want to cover your proteins, your carbs, your fats, and then micronutrients and fiber as well, right? So what you want to look at on that label is, hey, like how much am I getting in terms of carbs, fats, and protein? And we'll get into like a bit of a discussion sometimes in a sec, but something that's called a primary protein source contains most calories from protein. So if we're looking at, for example, chicken breast, that's a protein source. If we're looking at potato, rice, it's a carbohydrate source because most calories from that food come from carbohydrate in that case. For fats, once again, a fat source, like most calories come from fats, which by the way, also means that eggs are really just a fat source. I know they're great and it's a very high quality protein that you can get from eggs, egg whites, but eggs are really just kind of like a fat source with a good amount of protein.
Yeah.
So I will admit I do have them in my protein list now that I think of it, but I do also mention this to people because it's usually kind of like lumped in with that list. Maybe I should just change that. Actually, I might actually move it now that I'm now to think about it, But either way, so it is mostly a fat source. Now, so when you go into the shop, look at your label, look at, hey, like, are you getting mostly protein here? Are you getting mostly carbs here? Are you getting mostly fats? What does this give me in terms of like fiber and micronutrients? And it's good to remember too that fats are 9 calories per gram. Sorry, almost tripped over my words there. So 9 calories per gram, and then for protein and carbs, that's 4. That's a big difference, right? So you do want to be aware of that. Now, here's the thing. When we're looking at protein sources, there's meat, there's fish, dairy products. Those can be great. Let's actually go down that list. So there's often a lot of, plant-based options too, right? That aren't necessarily protein sources, like not primarily. And that's where this discussion kind of comes in. And I was just telling Kristine as well, when I did my CrossFit level 1, there's someone in our class basically who began a discussion with the crew who was doing the seminar. And they didn't agree that beans were a carb source because he ate it as his protein source. And that's fine, by the way. Like, that's totally cool. But we need to understand here, like, objectively how things work, right? And beans and lentils and chickpeas and all those kind of things are great. I love that stuff too. And I have a lot of clients eat that stuff and they're very healthy for you. Don't get me wrong. But they're not primarily protein sources.
Right.
You can get your proteins there, but it's not all going to break down that well because of that plant structure. So that's one. Sure, you're actually losing protein already there. Plus, you're getting more carbohydrate. So it's definitely way more difficult to puzzle that in, And this is also why I'm not the biggest fan of things like protein breads and those kind of things.
Yeah.
Because sure, they're like higher in protein, but even if you kind of get a little bit extra there, like I still wouldn't say like try to get most of your protein from those sources.
Yeah, the quality isn't there.
Great.
Yeah.
It's still not going to be a great like quality protein source. Now, going down to carbs, most want to have your starchy carbs there for fuel, right? So you with your potatoes, rice, quinoa, those kind of things, even like whole grain products. like bread, like tortillas, those kind of things. Big fan. And of course, your lentils and those kind of things too, you know. For fats, nuts and seeds, extra virgin olive oil is amazing. We've got avocados, eggs, like I said. Anything else? That's for the most part, like those type of foods, you know. And then I do like to kind of have fruits and veggies as kind of like a separate group. Because here's the thing, fiber is a form of carbohydrate, sure. But those foods, once again, like most carbs there, they're not really going to be used for fuel. They're mostly going to give you that fiber, you know, micronutrients, water, they're going to keep you full. For health, like those are key. Yeah. So that's why as a fourth group, almost, I like to say, hey, you know, per meal, let's also get like a fruit or a vegetable for those reasons. And you're going to get way fewer calories there too.
Yep. Yeah. So if we're looking for a good example when in terms of like, if we had a food that was 10 grams of fat, 10 grams of carbs, and 10 grams of protein, because fat has 9 calories per 1 gram and carbs and fats have 4, that would equal to 90 calories coming from fats and 40 coming from protein and carbs. So it would be primarily a fat source. Just so you understand that a little bit better.
Cool.
It's not that it's not a protein source. I mean, we have to definitely take a look at the quality of that protein, right? Like the protein in peanut butter is very clearly not the same as like from a quality standpoint as like chicken or beef, right? So it's there, but it's just not the same quality.
Yeah. And that's why you kind of run into issues in terms of a lot of the plant-based options, which I'm not against. Again, like this is just objectively how things are. Like it's facts, you know, it's not an opinion here. I want to point that out because this is not kind of like, we're not hating on this stuff. We're just stating the facts. Like, if we look at a cup of, like we've all seen that post, right? It's like protein from beef and then broccoli. Like,
first of all, you'd have to eat like 2 heads of broccoli. You'd be real gassy.
so unless you purposely want to shit yourself. No, guys, like on a serious note though, like it's just not a good idea. With fiber is great and it's good to have a good amount of fiber in your diet.
Yeah.
And actually even like going higher like can be a good thing, you know? You have your roughly like recommended amount. Now you can go a little higher. But with fiber, you can go too low, you can also go too high.
Oh my goodness. We have these like episodes where we lose it. We can't get it together.
You know, that's what makes this podcast the number one nutrition podcast there is. Because
we're the number one podcast.
Number 1.1. Because we don't take ourselves serious.
Yeah.
Or too serious.
Yeah.
But no, really though, like you can overdo fiber as well.
Oh yeah, I've seen it. I have a client right now that we're working on lowering her fiber because she's just having too much. She's bloated, right? And it can cause the same issues as having too little fiber. Got to kind of find that sweet spot. Yeah,
and that's also personal.
Totally.
I'd say most people kind of like a 30-ish range, you know, like 20 to 30, depending. 30 to 40 if you're a bigger individual, or if you're eating more, I should say, because it's really more related to how much you're taking in per day. But like you can definitely overdo it. And still then, like even if you eat like a kilo of broccoli, a lot of it is just going to like not be absorbed. It's going to be a mess digestion wise, you know? So that's not a great option. Then you got the peanut butter, same kind of thing. Like you might be hitting some protein. You're also getting a whole bunch of calories in.
Right.
So you might be looking at weight gain even, possibly, you know? But you just want to be aware of this stuff.
Totally.
I wanted to point out one thing here, which is really where it kind of ties back into food choices that we mostly want to make. I think Rose has something to say too.
She's,
but if we're looking at the more processed foods, which is not really something we really touch on with a whole bunch of ingredients, that's where it gets a little more tricky, because now we're looking at a lot of added sugars, a lot of fats, for example, right? Where not only are we just not looking at kind of like one ingredient, which are like the foods that we mostly want to get anyway, a potato, which is just a potato,
right?
Chicken, which is just chicken,
right?
Instead of the more processed stuff that has like 20 different items in the ingredients list.
Right. Yeah. So now, like, going into that is step 3. I mean, I look at the ingredients list right away. But like I said, it's not like the order of these steps. You can do whatever order you want. But now when we're looking at ingredients lists, like Johan just said, we want most of our foods being like whole sources, right? One ingredient. These aren't going to have really nutritional labels on them. But because both of us take a sustainable approach, right? There's going to be times when we are eating from packaged foods. There's going to be, a bunch of ingredients. And I think one thing a lot of people don't know about ingredients lists is that foods with more than one ingredient, the ingredients will be listed in a descending order by weight. So the ingredients that have the largest amount in that specific product will be listed at the top. And then it goes down from there based on how much is in that food. So if it's like mostly nuts, those are going to be at the top. If it's mostly water, that's going to be at the top, et cetera. And then it's going to go down from there.
Yeah. And that's also, again, just to emphasize that it's not bad for a food to have a bunch of ingredients. It's just context,
Yeah.
Like if your whole diet kind of consists of that kind of stuff, it's probably not going to be that great in terms of protein, fiber, micronutrients and stuff.
Yeah.
But I do want to, point out again that you can totally have those foods. It is fine, What do you think, Kristine?
I think that's good. I think we touched
Wrap it
on
up.
pretty much all when it comes to ingredients lists and what to look for. Plus, Rose needs to poop or pee or something, so she's going crazy over here. I don't want to let her out of the room because I'm scared she's going to poop in the house somewhere.
Jeez, watch out with that.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Nice little episode. I like the shorter ones. I'm going to try and stick below the 30-minute mark, or I should say. So that being said, we will talk to you guys next week. If you'd like to do so, share our episode in your stories, drop us a quick review, and then we will be back next week with a Q&A episode. I'll talk to you then.
Thanks for listening.